Have you ever found yourself caught in a constant tug-of-war between your faith and your old ways of living? What if trying to patch a little bit of Jesus onto your life, onto your habits, and onto your identity is actually making things worse? What if the very thing you think will fix your life is actually pulling you further away from the transformation that Jesus promises? Imagine, for a moment, an old, worn-out garment. It's torn, stained, and frail. And yet, you keep trying to patch it. Adding a little new cloth here, a stitch there, hoping that somehow it'll hold up. But as much as you try, the patches never seem to last. The fabric of your old self keeps stretching and tearing. Sound familiar? This is exactly the message Jesus was conveying when he spoke of a new cloth on an old garment. A powerful, yet often misunderstood parable that challenges us to stop trying to simply fix what's broken and instead to embrace something entirely new. Something unshrinkable, eternal, and transformational. In the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into the meaning of this parable. We'll explore how many of us are still trying to fit Jesus into our old systems, our old identities, and our outdated ways of thinking. We'll uncover why this approach always leads to deeper wounds and why Jesus is calling us to something radically different. Something that requires complete surrender and transformation. So, if you've ever wondered whether there's more to faith than just patching up the broken pieces of your life, if you're searching for a deeper, more authentic connection with Christ, then keep watching. This is the beginning of a journey that may change everything you thought you knew about following him. Let's begin. When we look at Jesus' teachings, we find that they are often simple on the surface yet incredibly profound upon deeper reflection. One of the most striking examples of this is his parable about the new cloth and the old garment, found in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. On the surface, it seems like a simple illustration about sewing and clothing, something that would have been familiar to any person in ancient Israel. But like so many of Jesus' words, there is far more beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. To truly understand the depth of this parable, we must first examine the historical context in which Jesus spoke it. At the time of Jesus, the Jewish people were living under Roman occupation, and their society was deeply entrenched in religious law, rituals, and traditions. For centuries, they had adhered to the Torah, the sacred laws given to them by God through Moses, and the teachings of the prophets. These laws, as we read in the Old Testament, were not just a set of moral guidelines but a comprehensive system that governed every aspect of life, personal, social, and spiritual. They were the very foundation of Jewish identity. Now, within this system, the Pharisees, a religious group known for their strict observance of the law, had risen to prominence. They were known for their meticulous attention to detail in following the laws of Moses and the oral traditions that had developed over time. The Pharisees were the keepers of the old garment, the guardians of tradition. But as Jesus would soon reveal, this garment had become worn and threadbare. It was no longer enough to simply patch it up. A new garment, a new system was required. When Jesus spoke of the new cloth and the old garment, he was directly addressing this very issue. The new cloth, in this case, represented the new covenant he was bringing. A covenant not based on the old laws, rituals, and sacrifices, but on grace, mercy, and a transformed heart. The old garment, on the other hand, represented the old system, the rigid structure of laws and rituals that, while good in their time, were now insufficient to bring true healing, peace, or reconciliation with God. Jesus' parable cuts right through the prevailing religious mindset of the time. The Pharisees and religious leaders had grown comfortable in their adherence to the law. They believed that by strictly following the rituals and making outward shows of piety, they could maintain their standing with God. They had become so fixated on the outward appearance of holiness that they failed to recognize the need for inward transformation. They were, in essence, trying to patch up the old garment, attempting to fix what was beyond repair. Let's take a moment to consider the metaphor of the garment in greater depth. In ancient Israel, clothing was not just about fashion or practicality. Garments were deeply symbolic. They represented a person's status, identity, and relationship with God. For the high priests, their garments were intricately designed to reflect their sacred role as mediators between God and the people. The garments of the poor, on the other hand, would have been much simpler, perhaps tattered or worn, reflecting their life struggles. But regardless of their appearance, Every garment carried with it a sense of identity and purpose. Jesus' parable, then, speaks to this deeper understanding of garments. When he says, "No one puts a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment," he is not merely talking about the practicalities of sewing or fixing clothes. He is illustrating the futility of trying to add something new to a system that is broken. Imagine taking a piece of new, unshrunk cloth and sewing it onto an old garment. What happens? When the garment is washed, the new cloth will shrink, and the tear will only become worse. The old garment, no matter how carefully patched, cannot contain the newness of the cloth. The two are incompatible. This is exactly what Jesus was trying to convey to the Pharisees and the people of his time. The old system of laws and sacrifices was like the old garment. It was not bad in itself, but it was no longer sufficient. It had served its purpose, but it was now stretched and worn, incapable of holding the fullness of what God was about to do. The new cloth, the grace of God revealed through Jesus Christ, could not simply be patched onto the old system. It demanded a new garment altogether. Jesus wasn't offering an upgrade to the old system. He was offering a complete transformation. We must also recognize the significance of this message for the people of Israel. The Jewish people had lived under the law for centuries. It was their identity. It was how they related to God. It was how they understood their place in the world. And now, Jesus was telling them that this old system was no longer enough. It had to be replaced with something new, something far more radical and life-changing. This wasn't just a minor change. This was a complete overhaul of their understanding of God, faith, and salvation. For the religious leaders, this message was not only revolutionary, it was offensive. It struck at the heart of everything they had built their lives around. The Pharisees were proud of their strict observance of the law. They believed that by following the rules, they could earn favor with God. But Jesus was telling them that no amount of rule-keeping could restore the relationship with God that had been broken. The old garment was beyond repair, and the only way forward was to embrace the new garment, the grace of God, freely given through the sacrifice of Jesus. In our modern context, this parable still speaks to us. The old garment, the systems of human effort and self-righteousness, continue to be a temptation for many. We often try to patch our lives with religious rituals, moral efforts, and external displays of piety, hoping that somehow these will make us right with God. But just as the old garment could not hold the new cloth, these efforts cannot contain the life-transforming power of grace. Grace does not work in the same way as human effort, cannot be patched onto our old ways. It demands a complete surrender and a new way of living. This is where many of us struggle. We want to experience the freedom and peace that come with grace, but we also want to hold on to the old ways. We want to keep our pride, our control, and our sense of self-righteousness, and yet expect God to bless us. But Jesus' message is clear. Grace does not work that way. It is not something that can be added to our old systems of thinking and living. It requires a new garment, a new way of being, a complete transformation. In the early church, the Apostle Paul echoed this same sentiment when he wrote to the Galatians. "For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ." Galatians 3 verse 27. Paul understood that the new life in Christ is not a patch on the old one. It is a complete change of identity. When we are baptized into Christ, we are not merely adding Jesus to our lives. We are being clothed in him, completely transformed by his grace. This new garment is not something we can sew onto our old ways. It is something we must embrace fully, surrendering our old identity and putting on the righteousness of Christ. The parable of the new cloth on the old garment calls us to a radical rethinking of our approach to faith. It challenges us to stop trying to patch our broken lives with religious efforts and instead to embrace the new life that Jesus offers. A life that is not about rules, rituals, or appearances, but about a complete transformation from the inside out. Jesus does not come to improve our old ways. He comes to make all things new. As we reflect on this powerful parable, let us ask ourselves, are we still trying to patch the old garment of self-righteousness and control? Or are we willing to surrender to the new life that Christ offers? Are we ready to take off the old and put on the new, allowing his grace to fully transform us? The call to put on the new garment is a call to complete surrender, to let go of everything that is worn out, stained, and broken, and to embrace the new identity that comes through faith in Jesus Christ. In the next section, we will explore how the old garment continues to manifest itself in our lives today, and why trying to patch it with new faith only leads to deeper wounds. We will look at the ways in which we, like the Pharisees, try to blend the old and the new, and why this approach ultimately fails to bring true transformation. Stay with me as we uncover the deeper truths behind this powerful parable and learn how to live in the freedom of the new garment that Christ offers. As we delve deeper into the teachings of Jesus, we begin to see the enormity of what he was truly offering, something far more radical than simple religious reform. In the first part of this exploration, we touched on the parable of the new cloth and the old garment, emphasizing the incompatibility between the old system of laws and the new covenant Jesus was introducing. Now, we must explore why the old systems were not just inadequate, they were deeply flawed, and their very structure prevented true transformation. We are living in a time where many of us still try to blend the old with the new, where we attempt to patch our lives with bits of grace while still holding on to outdated and broken systems. But as Jesus made clear, this approach will never work. The old ways cannot hold the new life he offers. Let's take a closer look at why these old systems, the religious traditions, the rituals, the moral frameworks, the very structures of society, are so inadequate for the new life in Christ. And why, even today, many of us still cling to these systems, thinking that by blending them with Jesus' teachings, we will somehow find peace or healing. We see it in religion, in personal lives, in relationships, and even in our careers. The need to control, to measure up, to validate our worth by our actions, by our appearances, or by our ability to follow certain rules is ingrained in us. It is in the very DNA of humanity. And yet, this is precisely what Jesus came to destroy. The old systems are designed to focus on the external, the appearance of holiness, the performance of faith, the adherence to rituals. They are about achieving outward success through effort. We see this in the Pharisees and religious leaders of Jesus' time. They had a system in place that worked, in their view. They kept the law meticulously, followed the rituals, and made sure their outward actions aligned with the prescribed religious norms. But what Jesus revealed was that these external markers of holiness were nothing more than a facade. They were patching up an old garment that was beyond repair. What Jesus demanded was not external obedience but an internal transformation. A new heart, a new way of being, and a new understanding of grace. In modern times, we see this same problem at work in the way people approach faith. We like to measure success by outward signs, church attendance, acts of charity, public displays of piety, or following rules and regulations. But these things, while not inherently wrong, can become distractions from the deeper issue. If they are done in isolation from a heart that has been genuinely transformed, they are nothing more than patches on an old garment. I know from my own personal experiences in ministry and from years of observing people's spiritual journeys that the temptation to live by the old systems is always present. It is far easier to focus on doing things correctly, following the rules, and making sure others see your good deeds, than it is to allow the gospel to completely reorient your heart and mind. We also see this in the way we manage our personal lives. How often do we try to patch up relationships with just a little bit of love or kindness, without addressing the deeper issues that are really causing the rift? How often do we try to deal with addiction or other personal struggles by simply attempting to white-knuckle our way through them, relying on willpower rather than on the transformative power of God's grace? Jesus came to show us that merely fixing the external is never enough. If we don't allow God to deal with the deep, broken places in our hearts, the patchwork will always fail. Let me share a personal story. A few years ago, I had a conversation with a man who had been struggling with his faith for many years. He came from a background where religion was all about appearances. His family, his community, and his church all placed a high value on the outward signs of faith. How often you prayed, how well you followed the rules, how much money you gave to charity. But this man had been living a lie. He appeared to have it all together on the outside, but inside he was broken. He had long struggled with depression and addiction, and despite all his efforts to patch up his life with good deeds, he still felt lost and empty. He felt trapped in the old system of doing the right things, but without ever experiencing true peace or joy. Through our conversation, he began to realize that he had been trying to patch his old life with the new teachings of Christ, but he had never fully surrendered his brokenness to Jesus. He had been trying to fit Jesus into the framework of his old religious life, but the new cloth, as Jesus had described in the parable, couldn't be sewn into the old garment. It wasn't until he made the decision to let go of his old way of thinking and embrace the grace of Jesus fully, without trying to patch it into his old habits, that true transformation began. This story illustrates the heart of the issue. The old systems we cling to are not just ineffective, they are dangerous because they keep us from experiencing the fullness of what God has for us. Jesus' grace is not something we can add to our old ways of living. It is not something that can be patched onto a life that is still relying on self-effort, control, and pride. It demands a complete surrender, a complete reorientation of our hearts, minds, and actions. But why is this so hard for us? Why do we cling so tightly to these old systems, even when we know they don't work? The answer lies in our fear and in our desire for control. We are creatures of habit, and the idea of surrendering everything to Christ, of allowing him to completely remake us, is terrifying. The old systems are comforting because they give us a sense of control. If we can just follow the rules, attend the right services, say the right prayers, and do the right things, then we feel like we are in control. But the truth is, we are never in control. And when we try to cling to these old ways, we are only further enslaving ourselves. Jesus came to offer freedom. Freedom from the fear of failure, freedom from the need for external validation, and freedom from the old systems of doing things that will never bring true peace or fulfillment. But this freedom comes at a cost. It requires us to let go of everything we thought we knew about how to earn God's love. It requires us to stop trying to patch our old lives with the new and to fully embrace the new life that Jesus offers. I've seen this in my own journey as well. For years, I struggled with the idea of fully surrendering to God. I was raised in a tradition where being good was highly valued. I thought that if I followed all the rules, if I prayed enough and did enough good works, I could earn God's favor. But no matter how much I did, I never felt at peace. There was always a sense of insecurity and fear that I wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't good enough, and that somehow I was falling short. It wasn't until I truly understood the message of grace, that God's love is freely given, not earned, that I began to experience true peace. This peace came when I stopped trying to patch up my life with good deeds and began to rely solely on God's grace. I stopped trying to control everything and allowed God to transform my heart. And in doing so, I experienced the freedom that only the new covenant can provide. It was no longer about what I could do for God. It was about what he had already done for me. As we continue this exploration of the new covenant, let us reflect on our own lives. Are we still trying to patch the old garment of self-effort and control? Or are we ready to embrace the new garment of grace that Jesus offers? The old systems may feel comfortable, but they are not the life-changing, transformative solutions that we need. Only Jesus can provide that. In the next section, we will look at how embracing the new garment, embracing the transformative power of Christ's grace, can lead to true freedom and a complete reorientation of our lives. Stay with me as we explore the beauty and power of living in the fullness of the new covenant. The story of Jesus' teachings is one of radical transformation, turning everything we thought we knew about God, faith, and salvation on its head. As we've seen in the previous sections, the old systems, the rigid rules, and the superficial attempts to patch up broken lives simply don't work. They were never meant to. Jesus came not to repair what was old, but to make all things new. This is where we begin to truly understand the significance of the new garment, the new covenant he offers to all who are willing to surrender their lives to him. The image of the new garment is not just a metaphor. It is a profound invitation. It is an invitation to leave behind the old ways of striving, self-effort, and the endless cycle of religious performance and to step into the freedom that Christ offers. It is the call to completely embrace the new identity, the new life, and the new heart that can only be found in him. In the previous parts, we explored the insufficiency of the old garment, the law, the rituals, and the attempts to patch up our lives with human effort. But now we must take a closer look at what it truly means to embrace the new garment, and why it is the key to living a life that is whole, free, and in perfect relationship with God. Embracing the new garment requires us to surrender our old self. This is not an easy thing. Our old self, the part of us that is shaped by the world, by pride, by fear, by past hurts, has become so familiar to us that we can't imagine living without it. The old garment is comfortable. We know its folds. We know its imperfections. We know how to maneuver through life while wearing it, even if it is threadbare and stained. But Jesus offers something far better. He offers a garment that will never fade, a covering that is perfect, unshrinkable, and eternal. But here's the catch. In order to put on the new garment, we must first take off the old one. This is not just a matter of adding a little bit of grace on top of our old ways. It is a complete and total transformation. Jesus doesn't come to patch our old lives. He comes to give us a completely new one. This is where we must confront the deepest parts of ourselves. We must let go of our old identity, our old patterns, and our old ways of thinking. We must surrender the worn-out garment of self-effort and pride, and put on the new garment of grace and righteousness in Christ. This process of surrender is not easy. It requires vulnerability. It requires honesty with ourselves and with God. And it requires faith that what Jesus offers is far better than anything we could try to hold on to. I know this from my own life. There was a time when I was caught in the trap of trying to be good enough for God. I thought that if I just followed the rules, if I just did enough, I would somehow be worthy of His love. But deep down, I knew that something was missing. I knew that no matter how many good deeds I did, no matter how much I tried to earn His favor, I was never going to be enough. That's when I realized that God wasn't asking me to perform for Him. He wasn't asking me to keep adding new patches to my old garment. He was inviting me to take off the old and embrace the new life He was offering through Christ. The new garment is not just a new way of behaving. It is a new way of being. It is a transformation from the inside out. When we put on the new garment, we are putting on Christ Himself. We are clothed in His righteousness, His love, and His power. This is why the Apostle Paul could say with such confidence, "For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ." Galatians 3 verse 27. Baptism is not just a ritual. It is a public declaration that we are no longer living according to the old ways, but that we are embracing the new life in Christ. We are no longer bound by the old garment of sin, shame, and self-effort. We are clothed in His righteousness, and this new identity becomes the foundation for everything we do. But what does this new garment look like in practical terms? How do we live out this new identity in our everyday lives? It's one thing to understand the theology behind the new garment, but it's another thing entirely to walk in it. The first step is to acknowledge that our old systems, whether it's striving for approval, living in fear, or relying on our own strength, simply don't work. We have to let go of these old ways of thinking and embrace the freedom that comes with grace. This means surrendering our need for control, for perfection, and for validation from others. It means trusting that God's love and grace are enough, and that we are accepted not because of what we do, but because of what Jesus has already done for us. I've had many conversations with people who struggle with this concept of grace. They can't quite shake the idea that they must earn God's love, that they must prove themselves worthy of His acceptance. I understand this struggle all too well. It's deeply ingrained in us to want to control our outcomes, to perform in order to gain approval, to measure our worth by our accomplishments. But the new garment, the grace of God, says something radically different. It says, "You are loved. You are accepted. You are enough, not because of what you do, but because of who you are in Christ." This is the freedom that comes with the new garment. It's not about performance. It's not about perfection. It's about embracing the truth that we are loved and accepted by God, regardless of our flaws or shortcomings. Another key aspect of embracing the new garment is understanding that it is not just for Sunday mornings. It's not just for church services or times of worship. It's meant to be worn every single day, in every moment of our lives. The new garment is meant to change the way we live, the way we think, and the way we relate to others. It's a new way of seeing the world, a new lens through which we view our relationships, our work, and our purpose. When we embrace the new garment, we begin to see people the way Jesus sees them, not as objects to be judged or compared, but as beloved children of God. We begin to understand that our worth is not tied to our achievements or our possessions, but to our identity in Christ. This new garment gives us the freedom to love others unconditionally, to forgive as we have been forgiven, and to live with a sense of peace and purpose that transcends circumstances. But the reality is, we don't always live like we're wearing the new garment, do we? There are days when we fall back into our old ways, when we try to earn approval, when we allow fear to control us, when we revert to striving and perfectionism. But the beauty of the new garment is that it's always there, waiting for us to put it on again. It's never taken away. Even when we mess up, even when we fail, the new garment is still there, covering us with grace. It's a reminder that our identity is not based on our performance, but on Christ's finished work on the cross. In my own journey, I've had to learn to put on the new garment every single day. It's not something I can just wear once and be done with. It's something I must intentionally choose to embrace, to walk in, and to live out. There are days when it feels easier than others, and there are times when I forget to wear it all together. But the invitation is always there, to come back to grace, to put on the new garment, and to live in the freedom that Christ offers. As we wrap up this section, I want to encourage you to reflect on your own life. Are you still trying to patch up your old garment? Or are you ready to embrace the new one? Are you willing to surrender your old ways of striving, controlling, and performing, and fully embrace the new life that Jesus offers? The new garment is available to all who are willing to let go of the old and put on Christ. It's not just a change of behavior. It's a complete transformation of the heart. And when we embrace it fully, we can experience the freedom, peace, and joy that come with living in the fullness of Christ's grace. In the next section, we will explore how the old systems and the new garment interact in our daily lives and why embracing the new life in Christ requires ongoing surrender and transformation. Stay with me as we continue to dive deeper into the beauty of the new covenant and what it means to live as a new creation in Christ. As we come to the end of this exploration into the transformative power of the new garment Jesus offers, I want to leave you with a powerful thought. The old systems, the old ways, and the old garments were never meant to define who you are. They were never meant to carry the weight of your life. In fact, they will only tear, strain, and leave you empty. But the new garment, Jesus' grace and righteousness, can carry the weight of everything. It offers you freedom, peace, and a new identity that is far beyond anything the world could offer. Jesus didn't come to patch the old. He came to make all things new. That's the beauty of the gospel. It's not about adding a little bit of goodness to your broken life. It's about completely transforming who you are from the inside out. You can leave behind the burden of trying to perform, to fit into a broken system, and embrace the life that he offers. The new garment of grace is a life of surrender, of peace, and of radical transformation. It's not about doing more. It's about receiving what Jesus has already done for you and allowing him to clothe you in his righteousness. The old garment can't hold the new life in Christ. Only by surrendering to him fully can we truly experience the freedom and joy he wants to give us. So, as you reflect on the message today, I want to encourage you to think about your own life. Are you still trying to patch up your old ways with bits of grace? Or are you ready to fully embrace the new garment that Jesus offers? Let go of your striving, your self-effort, and your old identity. Embrace the new identity that is found in Christ alone. Put on the new garment of grace and live out the freedom that he has already purchased for you. If this message has impacted you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below and share how you are embracing the new garment in your own life. How has grace transformed you? What old systems or ways of thinking are you ready to let go of? Your story could inspire someone else on their journey of transformation. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to God's Advice for more powerful messages that will encourage you, challenge you, and help you grow in your walk with Christ. Share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who needs to hear this message. The new garment is available to all, and it's our mission to spread this life-changing truth far and wide. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. Remember, Jesus isn't here to patch your broken life. He's here to make it new. Keep following him, keep surrendering to his grace, and keep putting on the new garment every day. We look forward to seeing you in the next video on God's advice. May God bless you, and may His grace continue to transform your life.